called the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. And there's actually two items on our agenda. One is just to set a date for the public hearing on the refinance of the high school bond. And the other thing is the oil tank. We failed an inspection, I think it was last Thursday, from the state on the oil tank at Mountain View Middle School. And we need to look at repairs or replacements, what we want to do as a school district on that. And do you have everyone that's in attendance down?
Yeah.
Excellent. Great, did you want to open it up, or?
Sure.
We have a representative from GCA as well, and I didn't catch your name.
Steve Raymond.
Steve Raymond,
Yeah.
to answer our questions as well regarding the oil tank.
Okay.
GCA is
GCA.
Geozone, what's it stand for?
Geoenvironmental.
Yeah.
GZA.
They do our oil tank.
They did our oil tank at the high school. They did the gas conversion over at Bartlett. They've done
Also
inspections.
decommissioned the oil tank at the Bartlett
Yep.
facility. So they've acted as our agent and interface with the state of New Hampshire Department of or DES. So they've come in and helped us with our immediate problem on this particular issue. And what we'll be looking at this evening and discussing are approaches that have been proposed by GZA to solution the problem that we do have over at Mountain View. And Steve, if you don't mind, I'm going to try to give it a top-down description of what's going on and jump in with details if I get any of them wrong,
Sure.
So that we can correct what's going on. The failure at the Mountain View facility is not in the tank itself, but in the cathodic protection system that is installed around the tank. It's a steel tank, and technology at that time required a cathodic protection system consisting of anodes that are attached in one form or another to the tank, providing some sort of an electrical field and protection for corrosion on the tank. That is the thing that failed. So we have two alternatives to consider this evening, one being the repair of the protection system, the other being replacement of the entire tank. We're looking at a 10,000 gallon fuel storage tank, and the state is mandating an immediate action on the school district's part to either repair the system or to begin decommissioning work of the existing tank. They won't allow it to stay in the ground in the condition that it's in right now. The repair activity can't be guaranteed, and the information that we're getting would be, if we could get 3 to 5 years out of it, that would probably be it on the repair activity.
But there's no guarantee.
Yeah, and I guess I could step in there a little bit. With the cathodic protection, with that having failed, the state requires that for the tank to continue to be in service, that cathodic protection has to be repaired. So that's the minimum that would have to be done at this point, would be that the cathodic protection system for the tank would need to be repaired. Where it gets a little tricky is that the tank is 20 years old. It was installed in 1990. At that time, the design life for a UST is right around 20 years. You know, back in Goffstown, it was the same situation. The cathodic protection had failed. The cathodic protection got repaired, and about another two at the high school. Yeah, sorry. And then about another 2 years later, the system failed, and some of the piping started leaking there, and eventually led to the whole system needing to be replaced immediately. So I guess with that being said, is the cathodic protection can be repaired. Before you repair it, the one thing that we'd want to do is what's called a leak tightness test. And that's a test just to make sure that the integrity of the tank is still there. The tank is set up with monitors as it sits now for what's called the interstitial space. The tank is actually double walled. There's an inside wall and an outside wall. And what happens is that space in between the two walls is monitored. And if water or fuel were to get into that space, there's a leak detection device at the school that would go off and notify us of that. When we did our inspection, that system was still working. So, pretty confident that the tank hasn't failed. but we would want to do an actual leak tightness test of the whole tank before we even thought of doing cathodic protection upgrades, because if the tank has already failed, it doesn't make sense to upgrade it.
I have
So-
a question on the leak tightness test.
Yeah.
Does that, when you do that test, will that determine if there's any problems with the piping between the tank and the school?
No. I mean, you can do specific testing for the piping and all that, and it just, I mean, incrementally in cost, it just goes up and up, and at some point, you know, the amount of money you'd be spending to do all this testing, it isn't necessarily worth that cost.
Because the reason why I can ask that, because at the high school, we did actually, the piping actually failed just before the tank failed.
Right.
And knowing that we're in the same age bracket for the life of the tank, that's why I was wondering.
I mean, the
If they
leak
did
tightness
include those
test
pipes.
is kind of the cheaper alternative to get right down to it and find out has the tank failed. But it won't guarantee that there isn't a failure with the piping system somewhere. So I guess the 3 to 5 years, you know, Ray was talking about is that, you know, the longevity of that tank, it could be 10 years, it could be 15 years, it could be another year, it may have failed right now. I mean, it's sometimes tough to tell, but the 20 years is near the, you know, the design life of that type of tank.
The other piece of information is that both the tank replacement and boiler replacement at Mountain View Middle School are on the CIP matrix for the 2013-14 school year. That presupposes we can get another 3 to 4 years operation out of the existing tank. So what we're looking at here would be a repair to the existing system, which would run at about $8,725, and then to check the viability of the tank and the repair to the cathodic system, we would be looking at an annual inspection and test cost of about $2,350. I assumed on the worksheets in front of you that we would do this for about 4 years, adding another $9,400 in potential cost to this alternative, which would bring the repair and inspection cost alternative up to about $18,000.
Right, because the inspection you're talking about, normally we would not have to do that, but because we're at the end of the life of this tank and we're trying to just do a patch job, we
Right.
would have to do this inspection every year.
We would want to.
You wouldn't be required to do it.
Okay.
The cathodic inspection's every 3 years.
Right.
But I guess to try to have some insurance that the tank hasn't failed, you know, it would be better to try to do that test on a yearly basis until you make the final decision on what you would do with the system.
Because it could be, worst case scenario, if the tank failed, it could be more costly to clean up
Yeah,
the
I mean,
failure
if
of the
it's soil
tank.
contamination and it goes under the building, I mean, whatever the scenario may be, gets into groundwater.
Part of what you do in terms of testing will be to look at the system that provides the alarm for the interchurchal space,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
As long as that's functioning, even if there's a breach of a tank, and that alarm system is functioning as designed, the likelihood of contamination, I would think, would be relatively nominal, unless you get a breach of both the tank and the exterior. Right?
yes.
Now, tell me if I'm wrong, because that's a lay understanding of something that I know nothing about.
In general, that's correct.
Okay. So we do have, at a minimum, even with a short-term solution, we do have a safety valve there in the event that there's a breach of the interior tank.
Yes.
Okay.
But which tank normally breaches first, the exterior or the interior?
At the high school, if you don't mind, at the high school when that happened, we had integration into the outer, and we didn't realize any oil. So the alarm went off, everything worked like it was supposed to.
Yeah, water was getting into
Yeah.
the interstitial space, and that was setting the sensor off.
So it was the
worked.
outer tank that failed first at the high school?
Right.
So you get a response from that system regardless of which direction you're getting an issue from.
Right, soon as something fills up that starts to fill up that space, it'll alarm.
Sue?
Okay, that alarm goes off.
Yep.
You go up there and you say, yep, the thing has failed.
Well, if the alarm went off, we'd have to go up there and do an evaluation
Right.
to make sure that it's just not a failure in the alarm.
Right,
The tank
come
has-
back and you say, inner, outer, whichever, one of them is kaput,
Yep.
okay? What does the school district have to do immediately in a scenario like that?
Ideally, it would be close the tank.
Which is what we did at
And
the
actually
high school.
remove it. You actually
Well, we
require
actually-
removal.
Yeah.
Removal.
We closed the
Above
tank, we
ground-
bought in
above
a
ground
temporary
temporary
tank before we were waiting to get the other tank installed.
Okay, so,
If it goes in the middle of January.
right, that's
Yeah.
exactly
Well,
what
that's
I'm,
good. Are there some benefits to be realized from doing it during a time when school is not in session and it is not winter? In terms of cost?
Yeah, and at this point, we haven't included like temporary tanks or anything like that.
All right.
And again, the focus on the repair activity, again, is to see if it makes sense to buy any more time to evaluate alternative heating technologies 3 and 4 years out. Who knows what's going to be on the market. 3 years ago, we were presented with a proposal to take a look at wood chips and using that as a source for heating the high school. Maybe that's something we can look at the middle school. Maybe there will be a new technology developed between now and 3 years, 4 years out from now. If we go with the full tank replacement proposal, and again, what we have is a range in cost, with a worst case being about $137,000, and a best case being just over $112,000. An investment of that nature pretty much locks us into number 2 heating oil for the next 20 years. And is that something that the school district would want to look at? So those are the choices that are on the table right now.
I have one other question. Actually, two. I know you're saying a repair could possibly add 3 to 5 years, and that there'd be no type of guarantee that could be provided with the work.
The repair is just to the cathodic protection system,
Right.
which the idea of the cathodic protection
It's
is to
prevent the-
limit the rusting of the tank.
Right,
Which
for on the
increases-
inside liner, it actually provides no protection to the outside liner.
Correct.
Is it the inside or is it the outside of the tank that has the actual ground wires attached to? And
It's on the outside.
It's the outside,
Yeah.
But
not the inner.
my understanding is the cathodic system doesn't provide protection to the outer tank, just the inner tank. Am I correct in that, or?
The whole tank system.
So the
It
cathodic
provides-
does actually provide protection to
Yeah.
the outside tank as well?
Yeah.
And do you, I mean, in your opinion, is there potential in the next 3 years for there to be significant changes in alternative fuel options available, do you think? Not if you have any idea.
Sorry.
Thank you. Anybody else?
yeah.
Sue?
Historically, we haven't been the first to jump on the bandwagon of something new. We usually like to wait and see that something has been tried and has proven to be effective and reliable. A lot of new technologies are gonna be coming down, unless you really, really know what you're talking about. It's gonna be really tough to do, to make some kind of decision on that.
At a minimum, what we're faced with tonight, ignoring what might occur in the future, but what we're faced with tonight is being in a position where we either have a tank that may have failed or one that is where the cathodic system is repairable. And we need to be able to make a decision on what we do under either one of those eventualities. Is that true?
I think we have to make a decision on how we want to handle this. Do we want to do a temporary repair if the leak tightness test comes back positive? My only concern with the leak tightness test is it doesn't necessarily test for the piping. where we have seen our failures occur first in the district. Because how much more testing, cost in the testing would it be to check the piping as well? I know we're looking at $975 for the initial leak tightness test of the tank. Do we expect that number to double maybe, if we wanted to check the pipes?
It would more than double.
It'd be an excavation, right? An actual physical inspection of the piping.
It would be more pressure testing and things like that, disconnecting the system and doing different types of pressure testing of the secondary containment and the primary piping.
Because my concern is we have no protection against ground contamination if it leaks out of a pipe.
Other than you do have secondary containment systems that do run back towards the tank. And we do when we do our annual inspection, evaluate those spots where the secondary containment terminates within the tank manway. That's not to say that somewhere between here and there, something's happening.
Okay, I guess I don't understand. On the pipes that are running from the tank to the building itself,
You would have like a copper suction and return line.
that goes around the pipe.
No, that is the actual line that carries the oil. And
Okay,
then around those copper lines, you
Is
have
it
another piece of pipe, PVC,
Okay.
could be a number of different materials. And so if there
and
were,
that's sealed where if something leaked out of the pipe, it would first leak to there and then go back towards the tank, you're saying?
yeah, well, those tanks actually don't have a tank sump. Newer tanks have to have a tank sump that has a tank sump sensor in it
Mm-hmm.
that the secondary containment connects to. So if there was a leak in the primary line that went into the secondary line, it would then dump into the sump, and the sump sensor would connect that. That's not the case. The secondary containment line just terminates in like a manhole, which is just dirt in there. There's no sump, but there is a seal between that primary line and the secondary line. So we kind of just evaluate that seal, make sure we don't see oil or water or
Okay.
anything dripping out of that.
And what are the chances of that outer pipe that goes around the copper feed pipe, of that having cracked or had problems with it over the years? Because we have no way to test that, right?
I mean, where it goes under the building, if the building settled at all, it could have cracked. Because the old lines were PVC most of the time, and so that's a little more brittle than the materials they use today that are flexible. Any number of scenarios could.
So my biggest concern is I don't want to see a contamination leak, because that could be an extremely expensive thing to clean up. That's why I was just trying to get an idea on that. Anybody else have, any other board members have questions?
We could end up finding out in a couple of days that we need to replace the tank. Is that true?
Possible, but the fact that the interstitial sensor isn't detecting anything, it's unlikely.
So what day is the leak tightness test scheduled for that tank?
It's
Did we schedule
It's
that?
not.
at this
Yeah,
Oh, we
point.
haven't scheduled
Once
it
we
yet.
decide, if you decide to just do the repair, then they would do that to ensure that the inspection the tank was fine. If you wanted to change over to the new oil tank, then we would need to do that.
Okay.
So the one thing would be, just if the board decided to go with the repair versus a replacement, that you make the motion contingent on the fact that it passes, that if it doesn't pass, that you authorize us to go forward with the new oil tank. Otherwise, we'll be back here in another meeting.
So we're looking at an investment at bare minimum of $87.25, and then we would probably, in order to reduce liability and to prevent any contamination, spend another $23.50 a year to make sure that we are not having a problem with leakage on that tank.
Correct.
So that could potentially, for the next 3 years, cost us $18,000. And the new-
DES doesn't require that annual inspection.
No.
That would
No.
be a choice on our part.
On the third year, you would have to do the
Okay.
cathodic. You are supposed to do an annual, just inspection of
Yeah.
the system.
Okay. And we're doing that.
Yes.
That's how we discovered where we are
Yeah.
today.
This was our 3-year test.
This was the
This is our
3-year.
3-year.
Yeah.
Just that 3 years for the state had to do the cathodic test.
What can we afford to do?
Our unreserved fund balance
Yeah, we can
is a
do
little over
either.
610,000 at the very least at this point, so we can afford to do either. I guess. it's a
We don't wanna
question.
do either, but we can if we have to.
I guess one of my concerns is, seeing as how our revenues came in higher than anticipated this year, we can, I believe, do the replacement and still have the 610,000.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Because
My
of the-
concern
Mostly
is,
because of the extra tuition money that
Right.
came in this year, yeah.
one of my major concerns is, I'm not at all sure that we're gonna be in the same situation later in the school year or at this time next year.
What did we spend to do the high school thing? Soup to nuts?
All told, it was about $150,000.
But we had blasting and things, well, not blasting, but,
It was
Cat
last
blasting.
night.
Ledge removal.
ledge removal, yeah.
Do we have remediation costs associated with that?
Not that I recall.
Okay.
And this would be a tank replacement, so they would pull the tank out and replace it
Right.
when we move it
So
into a
as long
different
as it
site.
doesn't
Yeah.
take move.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had to move the one at the high school, we could not put it back in the same place. Because somebody in their infinite wisdom built part of the school addition over the
Over
tank.
Around it.
So,
One thing to add, just on the new install side of things, is that lead time for a 10,000-gallon tank right now is about 8 weeks. And the state also has by law 90 days to approve design. We would request an expedited review, and depending on what's in the queue right now for the state with other schools, because usually they bump schools to the front of the list, potentially approved design could be, end of July, could still put you into
August.
August, September range.
Actually, we got an 8-week lead time on the tank, that's putting you right at Labor Day.
So can you leave the existing tank in the ground in its current condition for 8 weeks? Or would we need to pump it and install a temporary?
Well, I mean, potentially you could leave it until next construction season and avoid having to do the upgrades by discussing with the state and letting them know that the process has begun for the installation of the new system. And then I guess it's a matter of, you're going a year without the cathodic protection.
Okay, they would allow that though?
Most likely, yeah.
Okay,
I mean, we would have to have discussions, but.
okay.
So like to do that 8-week lead time, we could go without having to repair the cathodic system for the 8 weeks in
Or
waiting
even
for the-
potentially to do
Shut
the
off
work
the next-
next summer season. So then, as soon as the school gets out, the work would take place in 2011.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Diane.
Is it safe to wait that long?
Well, if you are monitoring the interstitial space and you aren't, getting leakage into that,
And
but
is
if-
the monitoring cost, will that?
No, it's
be-
So that's,
electronic monitor
that's
we have
electronic
Okay.
monitor that's
Okay.
already in place.
Just wanna make sure I get all
Now,
that.
if there actually is a breach on that space, I would believe the state would require immediate replacement of it, correct? They would not let us wait till next spring,
Yeah, it would be bumped up, the schedule would have to be bumped up.
which would put us during the school year requiring temporary tanks and pumping of the oil and everything. And it also affects the oil price that we get for oil because of the fact that they have to deliver in smaller quantities and use a smaller truck and go for the temporary tank. Because we actually get different pricing on oil depending on the building. Like the high school is the least expensive because they can come in with an 18-wheel and everything. So that does affect our oil cost delivery price during the school year.
Well, I would also point out that if you were gonna wait a year, you couldn't use the money now, you'd have to use
Next year,
next year's money to do
if
that.
you have any.
And just also, we were planning on changing this and buying a new one in 2 years.
2013.
Yes, 2013.
For 3 years.
3 years, excuse me.
Go over the unreserved fund balance thing again.
Well, we anticipated, when we looked at, since we had to do our initial budgeting back last September and October, our revenue has come up, we've also received some extra grants, etc. So we're still anticipating a $600,000 unreserved fund balance. Even if we had to spend the $137,000, it would have to come out of the unreserved fund balance, but I think that balance would still be in excess of $600,000 at this point.
How does it affect the winters? I mean, it'll come out of
The
the.
CIP.
It'll come out
It
of
would just come out of.
well, just the tank replacement. We also had boiler replacement at the school that same year as well. So that would still leave $120,000 for the 2013-14 year for the boiler replacement. We have 2 boilers in that school.
Either way, you're gonna have to get someplace to store the oil and pump it out of the tank, right?
Most likely you could work a deal with your oil provider to come and take it. And he would take it down to a certain level. And then, usually we estimate about 500 gallons remaining that would be taken out by the removal contractor, because that might have sludge and sediment in it. The oil delivery contractor wouldn't wanna pump that out.
And I did check, we actually topped off all our tanks just a few weeks ago at all the
Yeah,
schools, so we
Yeah.
couldn't
That's
take it,
right.
put it in another school.
Or potentially they could transfer it to, but if they're all topped
Well,
up.
when we took
Yeah.
the tank out at Bartlett, that's exactly what happened.
We
The
took it to
provider
the school.
came and took it, brought it over to the high school.
If we did the repair right now, we don't have that option.
I know.
Just because of the fact that, we out of our contract, we topped them off. Before our fixed price expired.
Any chance to resell it?
Well, the town might be, I asked Ray, because Dunbarton already topped off their tanks, and they had, so.
Yeah.
We'd have to ask the town where they sit for oil right now. But, I mean, it would be nice if the oil company gave us a credit back and then, or just
Yeah,
said,
just
we'll
hold
give
on
you
to
that
it,
amount of
yeah.
gallons back to you afterwards. But my understanding is that they wouldn't take all of it, because the potential for sludge, they do leave some there, which is a loss for us, that amount of oil that's left.
But at least it was at the lower price. Couldn't resist, sorry.
Yeah, and that would be the case if we had a plan to
Yeah.
change of the inspection, we would obviously not fill the tanks, but there would be a point where you couldn't go beyond unless we ran
So
out of oil purposefully.
Well,
if worst case
Rent-
scenario
rent
happens like in
several
January,
temporaries and fill them.
We could consider the rental of temporaries
you know,
and put all the
if
oil
worst
there.
case scenario happened in January, we wouldn't have a choice, it would have to get replaced. And we, as you said, have to find a way to store whatever oil we
We have to put a
have.
temporary tank
Like,
over
yeah,
at
we
the high
did that at
school.
the high school, we did a temporary
Right.
tank, because we couldn't install it yet.
But all of that's gonna cost us more.
Yes, and it also affects our oil price for delivery.
The price for delivery.
It was a smaller
And
tank,
it also-
so we had often deliveries.
'Cause they base our price, they actually give us pricing based
Right.
upon what truck they can use to deliver at the
Right.
school and everything. So I think we actually have 2 different oil prices, depending on which school it is, right?
Previous contracts,
Yeah, this one's all.
this one
This
is a
one's
single
not.
price,
Oh,
yeah.
this one's a single price,
Yeah.
okay.
And as soon
Oh,
as
that's
federal
better.
truck delivery, we aren't doing the tankers in any of the
Oh,
school
okay,
trailer
well, I
tanks.
take that back, our new contract is a single
Yeah.
price one, so we don't have to worry about that.
Is there an unreserved fund balance every year?
Not every year, there has been for most of these past, well, I think for the last 5 years there has been.
I don't recall a year when there wasn't one.
The other way you
Going
have
back to
one
the
is
1980s.
overspend.
Yeah, I honestly,
I don't think
I
the
can say for the
district-
last 5 years we've
I
had one,
don't
I
think
don't.
the district has ever overspent
No.
its
No,
budget.
we've never gone back to the voters.
No.
I mean, New Boston did last year, but that's the only one in our district that had to go back.
The town always had, the town has one too.
Yeah, we've never.
Well, their unreserved fund balance is different than ours. We have to turn ours back. The
I know.
town may keep
They use
theirs,
theirs to lower the taxes.
well, to stabilize them over time.
They-
I think it's probably a better word, right?
If you will, I've been up there.
Because they also have to keep a unreserved fund balance for bonding issues and
The
everything else.
the state makes them maintain a certain amount to get the formula based on evaluation of the town in case of
Does anybody wanna
emergencies.
make a
Is there a
recommendation on the motion?
recommendation?
It can't be that simple.
Well, actually, at some level, it has to be that simple, but I think, the questions are, do you repair or do you replace? And, when you consider making that decision, you consider the fact that, to to do so now, we don't necessarily, the balance is between using some unreserved fund balance as opposed to moving chairs around on the deck if we were to do that in next year's budget. I really look at this as being a need-driven issue. We have it on the matrix. I would make a motion that we repair the tank, do the testing that is required by the state on a 3-year basis, unless there's a compelling reason not to. I think that Steve is there.
Yep, no, that's correct.
I
And you
think-
still wanna just do the annual, like, leak alarm,
Right,
you know, test.
exactly. Do the things that we
No.
typically do, because it sounds as though the system is designed such that even if there were a problem outside of the tank itself and in the lines, that there's a system in place to capture that and to minimize the impact on ground and groundwater.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask you just to add a few more technical
Sure.
terms into that. I think it would also be based upon having the leak tightness test done and confirming that we don't have a
Right.
breach.
Right. If there's
And
I wonder if we can capture this all in one thing. Because I think we need to account for that. If we do have a leak issue, if the tank has been breached, then I think we need to take immediate action and repair it. I think we need
replace
to
it.
have,
if that's the
replace
case.
it, I'm sorry.
So
I think we
I
need
would
to have
ask that you be
the funds
asked,
available,
encumber the funds
encumber the funds necessary to do that.
in case that we find
Okay.
the,
Somebody care to put,
actually,
Well, let me read
we're
what I
actually gonna
have.
have Stacy just kind of review it as she's typing it here.
I want both the devil and the deep blue sea option,
Okay, so I have,
but contingent upon an adverse finding from the test.
Philip made a motion to repair the tank, do the testing required by the state on a 3-year basis, and comment unless there is a compelling interest to do otherwise, and confirmation that the leak,
The tank is still
the leak
viable.
tightening test does not display a leak. Should the tank be breached, the administration is authorized to go forward and encumber the funds to replace the tank.
I actually,
You need to encumber
I
the
think
funds.
that legally you need to make a
Right.
slight change in that motion.
I can't do it. Minutes and think at the same time.
Because we're looking to encumber the funds tonight
Yeah.
and expend only for the repair unless we find that the tank is not viable, and then we must proceed with the replacement. I think that's what Philip wants to do,
Yes,
because we need to
that's
encumber
exactly
the funds
it.
tonight.
And I'll be the second.
We can't second that. So anybody wanted to, questions or discussions on it?
Yeah. So we're going to encumber enough money to do the replacement if it is
The
necessary.
worst case scenario price is right now is $137,090. That's our max price for replacement.
Well, yeah.
It's a budgetary estimate.
Right, yeah,
You're gonna be
yes,
fair.
that's the max price.
Yeah.
Okay, I
That won't call
understand.
it a max price, huh, Steve?
So how much did you want us to encumber, the 137,000?
$90. But not with the intent of spending it.
Yeah.
The intent is only spend it if the tank is not viable and it fails its tightness,
You can
leak tightness
encumber
test.
that, but you have to sign a contract with him for the, roughly 18 to do the inspection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Actually, it shouldn't be, 18 includes,
Well,
is
Yeah.
broader, it's less than that.
The
are we
only-
gonna need more? So we're gonna they're gonna do the test.
Well, no,
Okay,
well,
come back, we're gonna have to pay for that test.
at bare minimum, what we will have to spend is $8,725. That's the bare minimum that we have to
Okay.
spend.
We spend the 8,000.
Yes.
They come back and they say, you gotta replace the tank. So we're gonna,
Well, no, actually, take that back.
37.
$975 test will be done first. We have to spend the $975. If the test comes back that it's breached and it's not viable, we will not do the $7,750 repair.
Right.
We immediately jump to replacement.
137.
Right.
Well, between $112,090.
I'm still saying we need
137.90.
more than 137.90.
Now you know.
You know.
We need the
Well,
975.
all right, technically, you would have to add
We need the
975 to that number.
975.
You're
That's
right.
a contract to make over.
So you're saying you'd like to encumber 138,000 to be on the safe side.
Yes.
085.
085, 138,085. You change your motion to reflect that?
Yep.
You change your second for that? Okay.
Sorry, but
No, no, that's a
No,
good
no,
catch, that's a good catch.
It's a good point.
Make
Go
sure we
over-
actually encumber the
go
correct
over the
amount of money.
figures, Ray. The only comment I have is, it's in replacement is in the CIP,
In 2013-14,
Right.
yes.
but there is no guarantee that it will make it through CIP in those
That's
years.
true.
There's no guarantee it'll last 3 or 4 years, no. There's no guarantee.
guaranteed that CIP will leave it where you put it.
Right.
That's correct. It could get bumped out in CIP as well.
But I agree with Phil, this is the way to go.
Yeah.
But you're taking a gamble on that too.
Yeah, we
Well,
are
it,
taking,
it allows us to ameliorate the risk. If we get an adverse test,
Well,
we
there are
need
two
to do
risks.
something immediately, right.
Two risks, the tank going,
Yeah.
and then not being pushed out in CIP, following and following and following.
Yeah.
Until it fails, then you gotta do it.
Ultimately, the tank will dictate what we have to do,
True.
whether it's today or in 4 years.
Or hopefully in 4 years.
Yeah.
I know, in 4 months, so.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
have you rewritten the motion with the corrections? Okay.
See, now you know why I do it with pen and pencil. Paper. Can't do it.
We're just going back and making all the changes we
I
just,
know.
Okay, Philip made a motion to repair the tank and do the testing required by the state on a 3-year basis, unless there is a compelling interest to do otherwise, and obtain confirmation that the leak tightening test does not display a leak. The administration is authorized to encumber the funds, 137,090 plus
Nope.
hold on, plus 975
Oh,
equals
okay.
138. I wanted to do why the two
Oh,
different numbers
okay.
are there. 138,085 from the 0910 budget to initially do the test, and then either repair the cathodic system as a first step, or replace the entire tank should it be necessary.
Legally, we need to have another part of that added to that motion, to authorize the administration to proceed with replacement if,
It is authorized to replace.
the way it's written now, if you came back and the leak tightness test says, nope, it failed, we'd have to meet again in order to actually expend.
Fail.
Can you operate with this? Absences, coverage doesn't become.
The administration is authorized to replace the tank should the tank fail.
So you're willing to change your motion to that
Yes.
effect, you're willing to change your second, okay. So, once she types that in, we'll reread the motion again for everybody.
Philip made a motion to repair the tank, let me put the oil tank, so. The oil tank and do the testing by the state on a 3-year basis unless there is a compelling interest to do otherwise. And obtain confirmation that the leak tightening test does not display a leak. The administration is authorized to encumber the funds, 137,090 plus 975 equals 138,085, from the 0910 budget to initially do the test and then either repair the cathodic system as a first step or replace the entire tank should it be necessary. The administration is authorized to replace the tank should the tank fail.
Fail the leak tightness test. Well, should the tank not be considered viable, because maybe they'll discover something else during the testing. So if the tank is not
There is a
viable,
potential during the
don't wanna limit
cathodic,
it.
because even after you do the cathodic, you have to do an initial inspection.
right,
And then 6 months later, and that's included in that 7750 number, you do have to do another cathodic test to make sure that it's still, that the system's still functioning. Because if there were a condition
Okay,
that
but that's included in
the tank was
7750
corroding
price.
quicker, yeah, that's
Okay.
included. But so it's not, the tank could be considered not viable, not just through the leak tightness test, but also
Right.
following
Through the follow-up
cathodic
test.
repairs.
alright, so yeah, so if the tank's found to be not
Not
viable.
Okay.
It's gonna be the longest motion. Jeez.
Does it make sense to
You
add
haven't been
the
watching Congress yet.
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
750?
Yes, have
Well,
one
we
covered.
we were able to expend up to 138,075, so hopefully we can get away with 8725.
Yeah, should we need to, we have that encumbered?
Right, but if we do that test and then they're indicating it could possibly fail within
Well,
that 6 month after we
you
do
won't
the
need-
Right, if it failed in 6
25.
months, we'd have to come back, because we could use that money to
Okay, I
repair it at that
okay.
point in time.
This is if we find the tank unviable during the next testing procedures now, yes.
Okay.
Does anybody need to have the motion reread to them by any chance? Alrighty, all in favor of the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Against, abstaining, 700, motion passes. The next thing we need to do is we have to actually, we want to you guys know that we wanna refinance the bond on the, high school. We're not extending it, we're simply refinancing it to get, some savings, which is in excess of 2% net. So we actually just have to do a public hearing on that.
That was 3% net.
Well, it's at least 2% net, we know that it'll
No, I
come
think
back.
it was at least.
I thought it was at least 3.
It was
Oh,
at
okay,
least
I
3%.
apologize, at least 3% net?
Right, I think 3%.
I think probably 2% net was the minimum amount to really make it worth refinancing, probably is what I'm
Ray's
thinking.
saying it is too.
It is too,
Oh, okay,
yeah,
I thought it was three.
net present value, and
Just talking.
it doesn't make sense to do it under that.
okay, so we know we're at least that, so, we just have to do a hearing. It would require at least one board member and one administrator to be present, so we don't have to have a quorum to do the hearing, but we need to do a public hearing to get feedback. It would be great if most of the board did attend. We're looking just to set a date for that, somewhere's, middle to third week of July, because we actually have to post it 7 days in advance and everything.
Look at the third one. The 19th, Monday.
Jeez, I haven't,
I think most people can make the 19th.
Yes, I do have another.
No, a hearing has to be held open for at least 10 minutes,
July 19th.
July 19th. Okay.
7, what time?
Wanna do 7 p.m.?
7 o'clock?
Make sure that,
6, 7?
well, the idea of doing it later allows more people from the general public to get home if they wanna come to it.
Once you hold that wall of sands, and we'll be there.
May not be around.
Yeah, we just have, I'd just like to get as many
Yes,
board
yeah.
members there as possible. And, I think there'd be a problem though, holding it at the high school though, because they are gonna be redoing the wiring and everything. Will the media center be?
Yeah, we'll make sure.
Okay.
By then.
So
Or
we-
at least it's cleared out enough that we can have the space.
Or worst case scenario, we go down to the Craig Hebert Auditorium.
Yeah, we'll find a space at GHS. This is a little big.
Yeah, well, we'd have to go upstairs. And I apologize, the only reason we're not upstairs is we actually have a repairman doing something upstairs and he hadn't
He
finished
just
by the
left.
time the meeting was gonna start, so.
Trying to get the last pigeon.
We have that at 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
It's cheaper to keep him here than to let him go home and come back tomorrow, so.
19th.
19th, 7 o'clock is when we'll do our hearing. And that actually takes care of what's on our agenda tonight. I'd like to thank, I actually was thrilled to see that board, budget committee members showed up tonight. So that was a nice plus, glad you guys came.
Speaking of budget,
And GTV, yes.
do we have an idea yet whether we're gonna do our budget presentations on November 6th and November 13th?
I don't. I have, Denise called in, has heard back from like 2 administrators, so
Okay.
we're waiting now.
Yeah, we'll do one of those 2 days, we'll do one of those
Yeah,
Saturdays.
Yeah.
Sooner
I'm
we
back in the
can
office, so.
pinpoint a date, the better.
Yeah,
People
well, this is
can
a lot of,
Fill it in on
a
their
lot of the
calendars.
administrators take their vacation week
I
this
know,
week, so,
yeah.
before they have to get into their summer schedule. Alrighty, can I accept a motion to adjourn, please? By Philip, seconded by Kent, all in favor of adjourning? And that passes unanimously 7-0-0. Thank you very much.